My parents tried to screw over my dying stepmother, but I told her everything, and now they've lost it all while I inherit her house and my siblings inherit the rest. My stepmother Jane is an extraordinary woman who entered my life when I was 4, during a time when my world was fractured by adult conflicts I couldn't comprehend. She transformed from a stranger into the bedrock of our family, fostering harmony where there was once only bitterness and resentment. While my mother remained my primary caregiver, my relationship with my father had been virtually non-existent until that point, poisoned by my parents' acrimonious split. Their interactions were limited to heated arguments through closed doors and cold exchanges of custody schedules. Jane worked miracles, helping them develop a stable co-parenting relationship through patience, understanding, and unwavering determination. She encouraged reconciliation on all fronts and became an unwavering pillar of support for both me and my mother during challenging times, even when my mother initially rejected her attempts at friendship. Jane's work ethic was legendary, bordering on mythical in our family's narrative. When she met my father, his life was in shambles, living out of a dingy hotel room with peeling wallpaper and a persistent smell of stale cigarettes. Meanwhile, my mother, consumed by bitterness over their failed relationship, did everything in her power to keep me away from him. She would forget about scheduled visits, claim I was sick, or simply not answer the door when he came to pick me up. In stark contrast to both my parents' chaos, Jane had built an impressive career as a corporate executive, owned a beautiful Victorian home in a quiet neighborhood, and possessed the wisdom and diplomatic skills to navigate our family's complicated dynamics with grace. She helped my father rebuild his life piece by piece, from securing him a job through her connections to helping him find an apartment he could afford. She skillfully negotiated a visitation schedule with my initially hostile mother, spending countless hours over coffee, gradually wearing down my mother's defenses. Most importantly, she ensured my father provided consistent financial support, setting up automatic transfers since neither of my parents could afford an attorney to negotiate formal child support arrangements. "Your father loves you," she would tell me during those early days, her voice gentle but firm. "He just needs help showing it the right way." She would sit with me for hours, listening to my confused ramblings about why Daddy didn't want to see me, never dismissing my feelings but always offering hope for better days ahead. Jane had no obligation to shoulder these burdens, but as I grew older, she made it crystal clear that her love for me matched the devotion she felt for my half-brothers, who arrived a few years later. I remember the day she showed me my room in her house, not a guest room, but my very own space with walls painted my favorite color and shelves filled with books she remembered me mentioning. She had created this dedicated space for me, recognizing that my unstable living situation, bouncing between my grandparents' cramped apartment and the various temporary residences of my mother's rotating cast of boyfriends, demanded a more secure environment. "Everyone needs a place where they can just be themselves," she said as she showed me the reading nook she'd created by the window. "This is your home too, whenever you need it." She was the antithesis of the wicked stepmother stereotype, a living reminder that family is built on love rather than just blood. When I was 15, Jane's life changed dramatically after winning a substantial lawsuit against an airline company. The case had dragged on for years, stemming from a catastrophic engine failure that had nearly claimed her life. The settlement exceeded $1 million, a sum that could have changed her lifestyle completely. With characteristic thoughtfulness, she established generous trust funds for both me and my brothers to secure our futures. I still remember sitting in her study as she explained the arrangements, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the documents with me. "Education, housing, starting a business, whatever you need to build a good life," she explained, her eyes twinkling with pride and love. "I want you all to have opportunities one never had." Despite this windfall, she maintained her modest lifestyle, choosing only to pay off her existing home rather than upgrade to a mansion. True, she treated herself to a new car, replacing her 15-year-old sedan with a modest SUV, and took my father on a few luxurious but sensible vacations, but she resisted the temptation to squander her fortune on frivolous purchases. "Money doesn't define who we are," she would say, "it's just a tool to help us take care of the people we love." This wisdom and restraint only deepened my admiration for her. About a year ago, an ominous change began to cast its shadow over our lives. Each time I saw Jane, her vitality seemed to drain away like sand through an hourglass, yet no one would explain to me or my brothers why she spent countless hours at the hospital. The mystery of her declining health coincided with an even more disturbing development, my mother's sudden and calculated reappearance in my father's life. Like a predator sensing weakness, my mother began circling our family with unsettling frequency. She would materialize at our house whenever Jane was hospitalized, transforming herself into a caricature of domestic bliss that made my stomach churn. The woman who had never shown an ounce of interest in my half-brothers suddenly appointed herself their surrogate mother, playing house with an enthusiasm that bordered on the grotesque. I would watch in horrified fascination as she prepared elaborate meals, she who had never cooked anything more complex than microwave dinners, and fussed over their homework with exaggerated concern. "Oh, sweetie, let mommy help you with that math problem," she would coo, the endearment sounding foreign and false on her tongue. The performance was so transparent, so grotesquely artificial, that it made me physically nauseous. This wasn't the mother I knew, the woman who had spent her entire life tending bar and living paycheck to paycheck, who had once told me that domestic life is for suckers. Most alarming was my father's susceptibility to her manipulation. I caught him watching her with a softness in his eyes that I hadn't seen since my earliest memories, before their bitter divorce. Despite my attempts to confront him about their suspicious behavior, he maintained his innocence with a conviction that only deepened my suspicions. "Honey, your mother is just trying to help," he would say, his voice carrying a defensive edge that set off warning bells in my mind. "Can't you see how much she's changed?" But I wasn't naive. The furtive glances they exchanged when they thought no one was looking, the hushed conversations that abruptly ceased when I entered a room, the lingering touches that seemed to carry echoes of their past intimacy, it all pointed to an affair blooming in the shadow of my stepmother's illness. Then came the red flags that set my internal alarms blaring at full volume. My mother, who had never shown interest in anything beyond her immediate needs and next week's bar schedule, began spinning elaborate fantasies about exotic vacations and luxury purchases. "Wouldn't it be wonderful to spend Christmas in Paris?" she would muse dreamily, examining her nails as if already imagining them freshly manicured at an expensive salon. "And I've been thinking about investing in some property, maybe a vacation home in the Hamptons." The sudden transformation of a career bartender into an aspiring real estate mogul reeked of opportunism, and my suspicions crystallized into a chilling theory that turned my blood to ice. One particularly revealing moment came during a family dinner that my mother had insisted on preparing. As she served an overcooked roast with the air of a Michelin-starred chef, she casually mentioned her interest in various investment opportunities. "I've been reading up on trust fund management," she said, her eyes gleaming with barely concealed avarice. "It's fascinating how these things work." The calculated way she glanced at my father, gauging his reaction, made my fork freeze halfway to my mouth. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, forming a picture that filled me with dread. Driven by mounting concern and a growing sense of urgency, I made the pivotal decision to visit Jane in the hospital. The sterile corridors seemed to stretch endlessly as I made my way to her room, my heart pounding with each step. When I inquired about my trust fund, the truth hit like a thunderbolt. In the event of her death, my father would inherit everything, including complete control over the trusts established for me and my brothers. When Jane questioned my sudden interest in financial matters, her keen eyes searching my face, I found myself torn between loyalty and truth. The weight of the secret I carried felt like it was crushing my chest. In the end, I couldn't bear to keep silent. With a heavy heart and trembling voice, I revealed the betrayal unfolding behind her back. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut as I watched the realization dawn in her eyes, shattering her already fragile world. "There, together?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the steady beep of hospital monitors. "All this time?" The pain in her expression was almost unbearable to witness. The revelation that she was in hospice care, her kidneys failing irreversibly, made the betrayal even more heinous. "I thought I had more time," she confessed, tears sliding down her hollow cheeks. "I thought I could protect you all a little longer." We clung to each other, sharing tears that spoke volumes about the pain of betrayal and the bitterness of impending loss. The hospital room seemed to shrink around us, becoming a confessional booth where years of deception were finally laid bare. Little did I know that this moment of raw honesty would trigger an avalanche that would destroy the careful facade my parents had constructed, bringing their house of lies crashing down around their ears. 2 days later, the carefully constructed house of cards came crashing down in spectacular fashion. My mother burst into our home like a fury unleashed, her face contorted with rage, her normally perfectly maintained makeup smeared from what I assumed were angry tears. The sharp click of her heels against the hardwood floors echoed like gunshots through the house as she stormed into the living room. The cause of her wrath soon became clear. Jane had met with her lawyer and completely restructured the inheritance, cutting my father out entirely and transferring control of the trusts to her sister. The papers had been signed, notarized, and filed before my mother's carefully laid plans could come to fruition. "Who told her?" she shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch I'd never heard before. "Who dared to interfere?" Her eyes, wild with fury, swept across the room like searchlights until they locked onto me. When my mother demanded to know who had exposed their affair, I felt a surge of courage that straightened my spine and lifted my chin. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite my racing heart, despite the trembling in my hands that I hid by clenching them into fists. "I told Jane everything," I declared, meeting their shocked faces with unwavering determination. The silence that followed was deafening. If you wanted to play games with people's lives, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word, you should have been prepared to lose. The words had barely left my mouth when my mother's hand struck my face with such force that my head snapped to the side. The sharp crack of the slap echoed through the suddenly silent room like a thunderclap, followed by the collective gasp of my brothers who had been watching the scene unfold from the staircase. My father stood frozen in the doorway, his face a mask of defeat and shame, the weight of his choices finally crushing down upon him. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, the lines in his face deeper, his shoulders slumped as if bearing an invisible burden. Sarah, he whispered my mother's name, a plea, or a warning, I couldn't tell which. But it was too late. Then came the moment that shattered any remaining illusions about my mother's character. With venomous spite dripping from every word, she turned to my father, her lips curled in a sneer that transformed her once beautiful face into something almost demonic. You want to know the truth, David? She spat, her voice thick with contempt. I never loved you. Not this time, not last time, not ever. She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that sent chills down my spine. It was all an act, every smile, every touch, every whispered promise. I just wanted the money. That's all you ever were to me, a path to Jane's fortune. The most devastating aspect of this ugly scene was that my brothers witnessed it all from their perch on the stairs, their young faces pale with shock and understanding. In that moment, they were forced to process not only their mother's terminal illness but also the bitter reality of their father's infidelity and the toxic nature of his ex-wife, my mother, who had tried to destroy their family for mere financial gain. I saw the exact moment their innocence shattered, and my heart broke for them all over again. The following day, I returned to Jane's hospital room, my heart heavy with the aftermath of the confrontation. The mark of my mother's hand still burned on my cheek, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional turmoil churning inside me. Jane listened with quiet dignity as I recounted the explosive scene, her face serene despite the tubes and monitors surrounding her like a technological cocoon. When I finished speaking, she reached for my hand with fingers that seemed more fragile than ever. My brave, honest girl, she whispered, her voice weak but filled with pride. Then she revealed her own strategic moves, explaining how she had dissolved my trust fund to prevent my mother from accessing any of the money. But don't worry, she added with a ghost of her old smile. As my eldest child, you will inherit the house and property, assets worth more than both your brothers' trust funds combined. She squeezed my hand as best she could. The divorce papers are already being prepared. Your father, he will walk away with nothing. It's harsh, perhaps, but necessary. Jane's final request was both a blessing and a burden. She asked me to look after my brothers, knowing that once I turned 18 this summer, I would have the power to evict my father from the house. They'll need you more than ever, she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You've always been their protector, even when you were just a child yourself. Her trust in me, even after witnessing such betrayal from those closest to her, moved me to tears. I promised her I would honor her wishes, determined to be the guardian my brothers deserved, the kind of parent she had always been to me. The aftermath has left our family in ruins, though perhaps these ruins were preferable to the facade we'd been living behind. I haven't spoken to my father since that day. The sight of him fills me with a mixture of pity and disgust. As for my mother, I've cut her out of my life completely, her actions having severed any remaining bonds between us. Let her live with the consequences of her greed and manipulation. My focus now is on spending as much time as possible with Jane during her final days, trying to create memories that will help sustain us through the dark times ahead. The thought of losing her tears at my heart, but I push those feelings aside, concentrating instead on being strong for my brothers and honoring the legacy of the woman who showed me what true motherhood looks like. Update, 3 months later. The passage of time has brought both healing and heartache to our fractured family, like waves that simultaneously erode and smooth rough edges. Jane, ever the warrior, continues to defy medical expectations with her remarkable resilience. Though her condition progresses relentlessly, stealing a little more of her physical strength each day, she maintains an inspiring positivity that humbles us all. I'm not finished teaching you kids about life yet, she jokes, even as the hospital machines beep their steady rhythm around her. She says she's grateful for the revelation of truth before her passing, allowing her to depart this life with clarity rather than living in beautiful ignorance. Sometimes, she told me during one of our quiet afternoon talks, what seems like a curse is actually a blessing in disguise. Our relationship has deepened beyond measure in these precious months, transforming into something almost sacred. The weight of impending loss grows heavier with each passing day, like a shadow that lengthens as the sun sets, but we've learned to find joy in the smallest moments. We've developed an unspoken understanding. She shields me from her darker moments, carefully maintaining her composure when the pain becomes unbearable, while I carefully filter the ongoing family drama, both of us trying to protect the other in our own ways. Sometimes we just sit together in comfortable silence, her hand in mine, both of us understanding that some emotions are too profound for words. The celebration of life we organized for Jane became an unexpectedly powerful moment of connection. Through determined social media detective work, I managed to locate her college friend, Thomas, who flew in from Seattle the moment he heard about Jane's condition. The lakeside gathering near the hospital facility exceeded all expectations, transforming from what could have been a somber affair into a celebration of Jane's impact on all our lives. The day was filled with quiet joy, good food that Jane could still enjoy in small portions, gentle music that brought tears to her eyes as she remembered dancing at her wedding, and shared memories that had us alternating between laughter and tears. When Jane began crying at the end, she assured us they were tears of gratitude, though we all felt the bittersweet undertone of farewell. "I never knew I had touched so many lives," she whispered as we helped her back to her room. "My brothers, now 13, have shown remarkable resilience in the face of such upheaval. Our aunt, Jane's sister, Catherine, has been instrumental in providing them with professional therapy, and I've watched them mature beyond their years in ways that both pride and pain me. They've developed an independence that makes me proud, though sometimes it breaks my heart to see them forced to grow up so quickly. I catch them whispering together late at night, sharing their fears and hopes in a way they never did before, supporting each other through this transition. Their academic performance may not be stellar, but considering the circumstances, they're handling everything with admirable strength. We have to be strong for Mom, they tell me, and in those moments, I see Jane's influence shining through. The situation with our mother has devolved into something between tragedy and farce, a Shakespearean drama playing out in suburban America. Her desperate attempts to worm her way back into our lives reached a new low when she tried to claim residency in the house, citing her impending homelessness. She appeared on our doorstep one rainy evening, makeup running, clutching a designer bag that still had the price tag attached, one last splurge before her credit cards were maxed out, I assumed. When I refused her entry, she revealed her true colors, calling me an ungrateful bitch and attempting to invoke maternal rights she had never truly earned. "I carried you for 9 months. She screamed through the door, her voice cracking with desperation or rage, I couldn't tell which. The situation escalated to the point where law enforcement became involved, though her status as my legal guardian briefly complicated matters. Thankfully, my father's presence, however reluctant, allowed me to remain at Jane's house, where I'd been essentially living for over a year. My father's presence in our lives has become a study in quiet penance, a daily exercise in navigating the aftermath of betrayal. Required to remain in the house until my 18th birthday, we've developed an unspoken dance of avoidance, choreographed to minimize our interactions while maintaining a semblance of family structure for my brother's sake. I've learned to weaponize his guilt effectively, using it to ensure his cooperation in Jane's final arrangements. "She deserves that much from you, at least," I told him once, and watched him flinch as if physically struck. While I maintain a basic level of respect, he is, after all, still my father. The power dynamic has shifted irreversibly. He spends most of his time sequestered in his room, emerging like a ghost during odd hours, occasionally attempting reconciliation with my mother, only to return after their inevitable conflicts with fresh shadows under his eyes. As for me, I'm navigating this complex situation as best I can, walking a tightrope between childhood and adulthood, between grief and responsibility. A new job with better pay has provided some financial stability, though my days are a carefully orchestrated ballet of work, school, hospital visits, and caring for my brothers. I haven't allowed myself the luxury of processing everything yet, there simply isn't time. The emotions are stored away like books on a shelf, waiting to be opened when I'm strong enough to read them. However, the unwavering support of a close friend, Michael, has been my anchor through these turbulent times, his presence a reminder that family isn't always defined by blood. He brings coffee during my hospital vigils, helps my brothers with their homework, and sometimes just sits with me in silence when words aren't enough. Final update, 7 months later. With a heavy heart that seems to both ache and heal with each passing day, I must share that Jane passed away early this fall. Her departure, though expected, struck us with the force of a physical blow, leaving a void that echoes through our daily lives. Yet even in death, she managed to give us one final gift. She exceeded every medical prediction, remained sharp and present until the end, and passed peacefully surrounded by those who truly loved her. Her final moments were mercifully brief, and we take solace in knowing she felt no prolonged pain. "Remember me smiling," she whispered to us in those last precious hours, her voice weak but her spirit strong as ever. Following the advice of many well-wishers, I recorded voice messages for my brothers, preserving Jane's wisdom and love for future moments when they might need her guidance. The recordings are a treasure trove of memories, her laugh, her gentle way of explaining complex emotions, her unwavering belief in the power of love and forgiveness. She chose to leave video recordings aside, wanting us to remember her vitality rather than her illness. "Let me live in your memories as I was," she insisted, "not as this hospital made me." In her characteristic thoughtfulness, she prepared letters for various milestones in our lives, celebrations, challenges, and moments of transition she knew she wouldn't physically witness. Each envelope bears a specific instruction: open when you graduate, read this on your wedding day, for when you feel lost, her love reaching through time to guide us even after she's gone. The letter she left for me to open immediately after her passing has become my most treasured possession, worn at the edges from countless readings. While its contents remain private, I can say that it cemented what I had long felt: she was, in every way that matters, my true mother. Her words continue to guide and comfort me through the darkest moments of grief, like a lighthouse cutting through the fog of loss. "You were my daughter from the moment I met you," she wrote, "and you taught me more about love than I ever could have taught you." My brother's response to losing Jane has been both heartbreaking and inspiring. Their grief runs deep, manifesting in different ways. Alex throws himself into sports with almost manic intensity, while Marcus spends hours in Jane's garden, tending the flowers she loved as if keeping them alive keeps a part of her with us. Continued therapy has provided them with healthy coping mechanisms, and our bond has strengthened in ways I never imagined possible. Late at night, we often find ourselves in the kitchen, sharing memories of Jane over hot chocolate made exactly the way she used to make it. We've become each other's support system, sharing memories of Jane and working through our loss together. In many ways, they've become my reason for pushing forward, just as I've become their safe harbor in the storm. "We're still a family," Marcus reminded me recently, "just like Mom always said we were." Surprisingly, my relationship with my father has found a path toward healing, though it's a road filled with potholes and unexpected turns. Through joint therapy sessions, he's demonstrated genuine remorse for his actions and has worked to rebuild trust. "I lost my way," he confessed during one particularly emotional session, "and in doing so, I nearly lost everything that truly mattered." While the past cannot be erased, I've chosen forgiveness, not for his sake, but for my own peace of mind and for the memory of Jane, who always believed in the power of second chances. Jane's passing seemed to awaken something in him, spurring him to become the father he should have been all along. He's sober now, attending grief counseling, and making genuine efforts to connect with my brothers in ways he never did before. My biological mother's story ended not with a bang but with a whimper, fading from our lives like a bad dream in the morning light. Her attempts to manipulate her way into our lives continued until my 18th birthday, growing increasingly desperate as her options dwindled. After which she seemed to simply fade away, her absence more of a relief than a loss. Her current life, from what little we hear through social media, revolves around a new relationship in another state. Her complete abandonment once the possibility of financial gain disappeared speaks volumes about the superficiality of her maternal claims. While the pain of her rejection lingers like an old scar, I've come to accept that some people are incapable of genuine love, too consumed by their own desires to nurture others. "She made her choices," Jane once told me, "but they don't have to define yours." As for my own journey, I've chosen to defer college for a year, recognizing that my family's healing takes precedence over immediate academic pursuits. The decision wasn't easy, but it feels right. Jane always taught us that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pause and take care of what matters most. My job at the local library provides stability, and my friends continue to be an invaluable support system. Michael, in particular, has become a constant presence in our lives, his steady friendship evolving into something deeper that I think Jane would have approved of. The outpouring of care from the Reddit community has been particularly touching. Your messages and concern have helped more than you know, creating a virtual support network that proves kindness can come from unexpected places. Jane's influence continues to shape our lives in profound ways, like ripples spreading outward from a stone cast into still water. Her example of grace under pressure, her capacity for love despite betrayal, and her unwavering commitment to family guide us forward. While the pain of loss remains acute, we honor her memory by embodying the values she lived by. Her garden blooms under Marcus's care, her recipes still bring us comfort on difficult days, and her wisdom echoes in our decisions. "Life is about choices," she often said, "and love is always the right choice." To those who have followed our story, thank you for your support and kindness. Jane knew of your concern and was touched by it, often smiling at the thought that strangers could care so deeply about our family's journey. Remember to cherish your loved ones and remain vigilant of those whose motives might not align with their actions. But most importantly, remember that family isn't always about blood, it's about love, choice, and the courage to stand by those choices even when the path grows difficult. With love and gratitude, this will be my final update. Jane would want us to move forward now, carrying her love with us but writing our own stories. As she wrote in her final letter to me, "Every ending is just a new beginning in disguise. Make it a good one, my brave girl."